$100,000 exposure if she has to go to the hospital because she's depressed or something of that nature. So the ambulance service is going to be in a position to be able to offer services and get reimbursed for services like never before through healthcare reform and accountable care organizations. So home care visits, granny needs company, granny needs whatever, EMS I think is a resource for that. I also think that there is opportunity for scheduled maintenance for granny. You discharge someone from the hospital, and rather than just take granny up the stairs and drop her off in her chair, maybe you do a risk control of her environment. Make sure that her pills are close by, make sure her water's close by, make sure there's no rugs or trip hazard. And ACO will pay for that every day, all day, to keep granny out of the hospital. Patient discharge, visitation schedule, and of course transportation needs. So if you go to granny's house and it's a routine visit and you find granny on the floor, or if you find granny is retaining water, or if she's itchy on her hand, on her arm, well guess what? If you're the for-profit ambulance service and you've contracted with the ACO and you find granny in a predicament that needs transportation somewhere, that for-profit ambulance service is going to transport that patient. They're not going to call the local 911 service and transport that patient to the ED. So the definition of emergency is now evolving, right? So a lot of community ambulance services have contracts that say, we've got exclusivity in this region. No ambulance service can transport my emergencies. If 911 gets called, I go. No one else goes. However, if granny is told through the ACO that if you need anything, you hit this button, I will get you help. So how many 911 transports are going to get averted because granny is 4 pounds heavier today as compared to 4 days down the road when she's in congestive heart failure? That's the danger. The episodic care that EMS is getting reimbursed for today, that model is a changing. And if EMS doesn't engage, that model is going to hurt you. So how do you engage the ACO? What do you do? I can tell you that more employers are self-insuring today because of healthcare reform. Right now, the ACO is only doing Medicare patients. So what you need to do is you need to go into your existing data and you need to pick out 50 or so ALS or BLS calls. And you need to find out how many of those, through opinions, may have been not legitimate emergencies. Because your opinion here is going to be somewhat in line with what an ACO thinks a not legitimate emergency is going to be. Headache. Does that need to go to the emergency department? Probably not. Leg pain. Anything besides the chest pains, stroke, shortness of breath. If you identify those calls, just do 50 of them. You can extrapolate throughout your whole Medicare reimbursement income and say, I'm at risk for 10% of that. As a for-profit entity, I'm at risk for 10% of that because that may not be there come 2014. Does that make sense? That's your model. That's your financial model that you need to go to. Right now there are 32 Pioneer ACOs. Pioneer ACO is essentially a group that has all of the entities in it, all of the providers already turnkey ACOs. And there are 106 groups that plug into these ACOs. So they're out there, they're growing. And if you go to CMS's website, and I have data that I can share with you, they list out the ACOs and they list out the contact information. So they want to know what you do, but they just don't know it yet. They don't know it yet. So EMS needs to change from emergency medicine to out-of-hospital care or preventive medical services or something.
Phil?
Yes?
What's the, you showed 106 ACO groups. What is that? What are those? What is that represent?
A Pioneer ACO is directly contracted with Medicare. So they are certified, licensed ACO organizations. So they are taxpayer entities. An ACO group is this provider and this provider that doesn't have all of the components to be a full-blown ACO organization.
But they're part of the ACO organization.
They're microcosms within an environment. So maybe in Pittsburgh, the ACO is boom, this. Then you have maybe a Southwestern ACO that maybe plugs into that Pittsburgh ACO.
I see.
So like I mentioned, once Medicare can identify savings from the ACO model, I will tell you that an employer, Amazon, General Electric, Boeing, whatever company that is self-insured is going to say, well, ACO, you saved Medicare $200,000 last year. I'm going to hire you for my at-risk population, right? So now you're taking within your geographic scope employees that are not Medicare eligible, that just came out of the hospital for knee surgery. They are a fall victim. That hospital does not want that readmission back because the ACO is going to get dinged. So your population base is not just 65-year-old Medicare eligible recipients when this can be proven. And when this is proven, this is going to go fast. Self-insured employers are going to want to save every dollar possible, and they're going to hire an ACO and incentivize them. There's no disincentive for the employer to do this. So if you're not engaged, by the time this happens, you're going to be from the outside looking in. Any questions about this? Now, I know ACOs are somewhat of a hot topic. Is this what everyone here thinks is going to happen? We've got anybody that thinks it's not going to happen?
I think we've all known in the EMS industry, we'll just say at least 25, 30 years, that we could have saved them tons of money, but we had no incentive to do that because, well, then you don't make money. You had to transport to make money.
Goes back to where's the incentive? Who's controlling the incentive?
In Indiana, we're already doing a real small test market with telemedicine using the video surveillance with the hospital. They've got a grant to test a lot of this, and it's over our head, but they're asking us, well, you got the technology on board, let's see if we can play this a little bit. They're not understanding how we're going to get reimbursed, but they're playing with it through a grant.
Goes back to that dispatch, the need. We are in a concierge society, right? So the older generation is brought up from, I need something now. We have been an episodic society since the day of medicine. So the concept of pushing this button to gain something is not foreign to these people.
Instant gratification.
Instant gratification, yes.
Well, I think what's going to happen too is you're going to see that the emergency rooms are only going to be a throughway or a gateway for folks to get admitted. Other than folks who are going to get admitted to the hospital, there's no real reason for them to sit in an emergency department. If there are other means out there, whether it's an urgent care or taking them to a physician's office or something like that, you eliminate the need for us to transport those patients to the emergency department. Because if you think about it now, we take them there, they stitch them, they sling them, and they turf them. The ER will only become a throughway for folks who are getting admitted for sepsis, chest pain, 23-hour observations, those sort of things. So we're not going to get paid to bring people there who do not need an emergency department. It's going to be our jobs to steer them and guide them to urgent cares, a physician's office, somewhere other than those emergency departments, and save those costs and then reap the benefits.
That makes sense.
I think the ACOs,
the doctor versus the
right, I think once they see it, and I think Phil hits the nail on the head, once they see how we can do this, and as the frontline people, as those folks who are initially engaging these people in the healthcare system, and we can effectively drive them where they need to be, literally and figuratively, and we know through assessments and everything else that that's not the emergency department, just that cost savings alone would be enough to justify what we're doing.
You know, and then to comment on that a little bit further, and not to refute it, because I support it, but in the previous lecture we talked about how many lawyers there are in this country. What's going to happen then with the 1-800 I'm a lawyer, I'm going to chase the ambulance around, but it's just going to get worse. Because now if we're not taking people to the emergency department, and then the what if, oh my gosh, they actually had this massive abdominal split, you know, like a spleen rupture or something crazy. So now all of a sudden we just turn this patient away or turn to an urgent care, and no crap, now we got to take him back to the emergency room. Then the 1-800 lawyer is going to chase us down.
There will certainly be that exposure, but I think technology and the testing that we can do will mitigate some of that. You know, there's troponin meters now, so you can roll out
CTs, there's handheld CTs. I mean, there are a lot of things from a technology perspective that if we can engage and enroll those and do a much more thorough assessment, whether it's through telemedicine or whatever, then again, as that primary focus or that primary patient contact, it's our job to mitigate where they go. So, I mean, if we don't do it right, that's going to be bad. But if we have all the tools in place to do it correctly the first time, then there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that.
I think there'll be another component to that, though, because I think you're right, that litigation is going to be a big part of this. But like anything else, I think it's going to be more of a state-to-state. Tort reform is going to have to follow this, there's no question. And CMS has already shown a willingness to mitigate some of that by allowing the ACOs to contract at rates below Medicare levels. So the AG, you don't have to worry about the Attorney General's office coming after you for contracting. They waived that safe harbors component of Medicare in all of these cases. So, I mean, there's no way to get around the litigation of this, but I think it'll take time for that to work its way into the...
It will evolve. I think there will be strong push for this ACO to work.
Right.
What does that mean? You can interpret it the way you want, but I don't think there will be success to lawsuits because everyone's going to be litigious on some of these things. So I don't preach to know as much as the experts know on the ACO, but I think fundamentally there's a motive here to fully develop this. And this can't be fully developed without you all plugging in your resources and your expertise. I've got a LinkedIn page that I encourage you guys to join, share ideas and share concepts. I've got some documents posted there, so take advantage of that whenever you can. Any questions high level about the ACO concept?
From a national perspective, I'm aware of maybe 3 or 4 states that are getting out ahead of this. Is that what you're seeing? Do you see this moving quickly in terms of EMS and where EMS fits into this?
States meaning like they're taking the...
Well, Minnesota has passed legislation that will actually reimburse EMS providers for community paramedicine. Maine has started a pilot project to allow community paramedicine I don't see this as a big movement at this point. Am I wrong?
I don't either, because you don't want this to be a state-led program. You don't want to be led through state initiatives. You want the enterprise sector, the ACOs, push this because you've got the resources. So,
But they need to know that. I mean, a fair amount of those, like he showed in that silo, if we don't invite ourselves to that table, it's going to be a while before they go, oh wait, we should have thought about EMS. And like I said, I think that the way to sell it is we are the primary contact for that patient to get into the system. And it's our job to direct and guide them where they need to go the first time. And it might be the ER, it might be the chest pain or the shortness of breath patient or somebody that you know that needs a bed or needs an ICU something. But if it isn't, it's our medical training and knowledge that are supposed to steer those. And until we bang at their door or get with them at the table, we're going to be an afterthought.
So I strongly encourage discussion on our social medias. So we'll continue the dialogue as things develop. So what I would like to do is change direction here almost 180 degrees. We invited Randy Beckian to present on the incentives of captives and succession planning and those sort of things. So Randy's going to speak for the remainder of the session about captives, and I certainly can't do justice for what he talks about. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Randy Becky, I'm an insurance tax guy. This is a small group. We have about 35, 40 minutes, or if you want to stay 3 minutes later. This is free tax planning. I come from the school of thought that captive insurance planning, captive insurance management is tax management. There's no separating the two, really. Do we have anybody in the audience who is affiliated with a hospital or a tax-exempt organization? We're all dissolved, closely held companies. Everybody's interested in saving tax. Okay, I'm going to start my talk in the middle, owing to shortness of time, and also because I think if we put our teeth into an example, the topics of interest may fall out of that. Please interrupt me as I go, since we don't have a lot of time. If we can make this interactive, the question that's on your mind is probably a question on someone else's mind too. Here is an idea of the day, something I've been working on and off for a number of years. Anybody here pay Social Security tax on their income? Let's get rid of that. Here's how. We convert compensation income into captive insurance accumulated earnings, and if we do it right, you would never pay tax on that compensation of any kind for as long as you live. The way to do it is to say, let's have your employer create a deferred compensation program for you. That instead of receiving $300 of compensation today, you agree to receive $600 of compensation 10 years from now, assuming 8% growth, but it's at risk because the growth rate is tied to the S&P 500 index. So you don't really know exactly how much you're going to get 10 years from now, but you're willing to defer 300 years today under the assumption that it will be invested at a relatively high yield growth instrument that's relatively diversified in the first place. Okay, if that's our starting point, the way to do tax planning for it could be for you and the employer to set up a captive insurance company. And it's not just you and the employer, it's probably everybody in the management group of the employer. So there's several of these, and there's economy of scale in managing them accordingly. And the cell captive would be 50% owned by the employer and 50% by you. Why 50-50? Well, the employer's going to pay premiums to it that are profitably priced. And the employer has to own half of it in order for the sale of insurance coverage from the captive to the employer to be a transaction that is legally within the scope of captive insurance regulation. So the employer needs to own half of the company, but you'll get the rest, but you'll get